I gave up everything to build a life for my children. Not just time or money, but my youth, my strength, and every dream I once had that didn't involve them. I poured myself into that land, day after day, year after year. My hands bled in. The winter and cracked in the summer, but I never stopped. That soil holds more than crops. It holds memories, pain, sacrifice. Every fence post, every worn-out tool, every inch of that farm has a piece of my soul in it. I built it hoping that one day my children would understand what it meant, that they'd see more than just a piece of land, but a legacy, one they could carry on long after I was gone. But I was wrong. The day my son Adam looked me in the eye and told me I needed to sell the farm to fund his wedding was the day something inside me broke, not just because of the request, but because of how easily he asked. No hesitation, no gratitude. Just a cold expectation that everything I had worked for could be thrown away for one extravagant event. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask him how he could forget everything I had given. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I nodded, and I told him I'd take care of it. What he didn't know was that I already had a plan he'd never see coming, a plan that would protect everything I had built and teach him a lesson he'd never forget, because sometimes the greatest revenge is protecting what matters most. My name is Bernard. I'm 72 years old, and for as long as I've drawn breath, I've known only one home, the farm. It's not a big operation, not by today's standards. No fancy machines or corporate signs out front. Just a modest patch of earth tucked away between two quiet hills, where the sun rises slowly and steady and the mornings start with the smell of dew, hay, and old wood. My father built the barn with his bare hands. Wood he cut, nails he hammered, beams he hoisted without a crane. I used to run between the beams before the roof was finished, playing hide and seek with my little sister while he shouted at us to be careful from the ladder. I took my first steps in those fields, learned how to fix a fence before I learned how to write cursive. I remember chasing chickens barefoot, falling asleep in the back of our old pickup while my dad bargained at the livestock market. Those weren't just chores or childhood moments. They were the foundation of everything I would become. Over the years, the farm became more than land. It became my identity. I married my sweetheart, May, under the willow tree by the creek that runs through the south end. She used to say the wind sounded like a lullaby out there. We raised 2 children, Adam and Rachel, inside the same house my father built, with creaky stairs and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and cinnamon. Every morning started before sunrise. Every night ended with sore muscles and silence. And yet, I never once felt burdened by the work, because it meant something. Every nail I drove, every crop I planted, it was all part of building a future, not just for me, but for them. I remember the storms, those brutal summer nights when the rain fell sideways and I'd stay up listening to the roof groan, praying it wouldn't cave in, and the droughts when the soil cracked like broken skin and we had to ration water just to keep the animals alive. Most folks would have given up, moved on, but I didn't. Because every time I thought about quitting, I thought about my kids, about the legacy I wanted to hand them, something real, something earned. I wasn't in it for money. God knows we never had much of that. There were winters we had to patch the roof with plastic sheeting and summers we couldn't afford to fix the truck. But we always had enough to eat, and more importantly, we had pride. Pride in what we built, in what we sustained despite the odds. People don't talk much about farmers anymore. We've become background noise in a world obsessed with speed and shine. But I'll tell you something. There's a kind of truth you only learn when your hands are in the dirt, when you watch things grow because of your labor, when you know the land so well you can predict the weather just by the way the leaves turn. The farm was my peace, my therapy. On hard days, I'd walk the back field and just listen to the wind through the corn stalks. That sound, it's better than any sermon I've ever heard. And when May passed, too early, too sudden, I walked those fields every day just to feel close to her. I'd stand by the willow tree where we said our vows and feel her hand in mine again. The farm wasn't just mine, it was hers too. It was ours. As Adam and Rachel grew up, I tried to pass on the lessons I learned. I showed them how to plant, how to mend, how to listen, not just to people but to the land. Rachel took to it. She was quiet, curious, always asking why things worked the way they did. She'd help me with the books, feed the chickens without being asked. She'd sit on the fence post and watch the sunset with me in complete silence. No phone, no distractions. Just being present. Adam was different. Smart, charming, full of energy, but restless. He'd help sometimes, but his heart was never in it. He wanted more, bigger things, flashier things. As a boy, he'd talk about moving to the city, owning a fancy car, throwing big parties. I never tried to stop him. I figured maybe, just maybe, once he tasted the outside world, he'd come back with a deeper appreciation for home, for the roots we gave him. But life doesn't always unfold the way you hope. Even after Adam left, I kept working. Slower now. Sure. The knees ache more and I can't lift like I used to. But the farm still needs me, and in some ways I still need it. I've seen the seasons turn 72 times. I've buried friends. I've said goodbye to neighbors, but the land has always remained. Constant, steady, like a second heartbeat. I had always imagined that one day when I couldn't do it anymore, I'd pass the keys to my children. Maybe Adam would see the value then. Maybe Rachel would carry on what we started. I thought they'd walk the same fields I did and feel what I felt. The pride, the peace, the purpose. But as I'd soon find out, some people don't see value in what's given freely. Some don't see legacy. They see leverage. They see money, opportunity, something to be spent. And it was that misunderstanding, the gap between what the farm meant to me and what it meant to Adam, that would lead us into the hardest moment of our relationship. I didn't know it yet, but the day he came home with that look in his eye, the look of someone who sees a price tag instead of a memory, was the day everything began to change. Adam used to follow me around the farm like a shadow. As a boy, he'd wear my old hat, too, big for his head, dragging it over his ears as he mimicked every move I made. He'd pretend to steer the tractor, though his feet couldn't even reach the pedals, and he'd hand me nails while I fixed the chicken coop, asking 100 questions about everything from fence wire to fertilizer. He was sharp, full of energy, and I used to think he'd grow into the next generation of this land. But somewhere along the way things started to shift. As he grew older, the dirt under his nails started to bother him. The early mornings became complaints. He'd come home from school and rush through his chores just to get back to his video games or out to meet his friends. I told myself it was just a phase, that every boy drifts for a while. But Adam didn't drift, he detached. The farm went from being his playground to being his prison, at least in his eyes. He started talking about city life, fancy jobs, big paychecks, places where no one smelled like cow manure or worried about the rain forecast ruining a whole season's work. When he turned 18, he left for college and never really looked back. He'd visit for holidays sometimes, but even those became shorter and more infrequent. When he did come home, he acted like he was doing us a favor. He'd walk through the barn like it was a museum exhibit, pointing out how run down everything looked, asking why we hadn't modernized. Once I caught him on the phone with a friend, laughing about how old school everything was back home. That stung, more than I let on. Still, I loved my boy. I figured he needed time to find himself, to grow. I thought maybe once he'd seen the world, he'd appreciate his roots. But what happened next proved just how far he'd strayed from the values I tried to raise him with. He showed up one Saturday morning out of the blue. I was on the porch, fixing the handle on an old rocking chair, when his sleek black car pulled into the driveway. It didn't belong there. It looked too clean, too loud, too proud. He got out wearing a blazer, shiny shoes, and sunglasses, like he was walking into a boardroom instead of home. Rachel came out of the kitchen and gave me a look. We both knew this wasn't just a social visit. Adam sat down, made small talk for a few minutes, and then got to the point. "Dad," he said, "I need you to sell the farm." Just like that. No lead-up, no softening the blow. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but it never came. "We need the money for the wedding," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Sarah's parents already chipped in, but it's not enough. We want something elegant, something people will remember." I blinked. "Sell the farm?" I asked, just to make sure I'd heard right. He nodded. "Yeah, come on, Dad. It's not like you're doing anything major with it anymore. You're retired more or less, and let's be honest, this place isn't exactly increasing in value." The words hit harder than he knew. I sat there quietly, trying to control my breathing, my heartbeat, my rage. He kept going. "We've got this beautiful venue in mind. Vineyard, open bar, fireworks, the whole package. But the deposit's steep. If you sell the farm, we can cover everything and still have some left over for the honeymoon. You'd be setting us up for a great start." He smiled like he'd just solved a puzzle, like this was a practical solution for everyone. He wasn't asking. He was expecting. There was no question mark in his voice, only assumption. He assumed. I'd give up everything I'd ever worked for just so he could throw a party. It wasn't the wedding itself that bothered me. Weddings are special, I had one. His mother deserved every bit of joy we could give her on that day. But what cut deep was the ease with which he asked me to let go of everything. The house his mother and I built room by room, the soil where my father's ashes rested, the barn where he took his first steps. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a humble request. It was a demand presented with a smile and dressed up in entitlement. There was no mention of the farm's history, no acknowledgement of the decades of sacrifice, no question about how I might feel, only how this would benefit him. He didn't see a home. He saw a bank account. I wanted to tell him no right then and there. I wanted to ask him where his sense of respect had gone, if he'd left it behind when he bought his designer shoes, or if he'd buried it under his social media dreams. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I nodded slowly and said, "Let me think about it." Not because I agreed, but because I needed time. Not just to calm the storm raging in my chest, but to figure out how best to protect what he was trying to tear down. After all, this farm wasn't just a piece of land. It was a lifetime. It was a heartbeat. And if my son couldn't see that, then I would have to show him. Not with anger, but with action. Because love doesn't always mean saying yes. Sometimes love means drawing a line, even with your own blood. At first I laughed. Not a hearty laugh, not one of joy, just a short, disbelieving chuckle that escaped before I could stop it. I looked at Adam, expecting a grin, a wink, some sign that this was all part of some elaborate joke, the kind of absurd thing someone says just to get a rise out of their old man. But his face didn't flinch. No curve at the corner of his lips, no glint of mischief in his eyes. Just stillness, cold and serious. That's when I knew. He meant every word. "You don't really need the place anymore, do you?" he asked, his tone as casual as if he were talking about an old jacket. "It's old, outdated, and let's be honest, who else would want it?" There was something in the way he said outdated that hit me like a punch to the gut. Like the years I'd spent building, fixing, nurturing meant nothing. Like I was clinging to something that had long since passed its expiration date. I tried to stay composed, but inside, it felt like the air had gone out of my lungs. I looked around, at the porch, the trees, the faded paint on the barn, the worn path I'd walked thousands of times. He saw decay. I saw memories. He saw dust. I saw the fingerprints of generations. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. That smooth, businesslike confidence, as if he was explaining the logic of a real estate transaction to someone too sentimental to see the numbers. There was no respect in his voice, no trace of the boy who used to beg me to take him on the tractor. Just entitlement. Cold, sharp entitlement. The unspoken belief that I owed him something, that this land, this life, was his to decide over, simply because he bore my name. I didn't argue. Not then. I looked at him for a long time, searching for something behind his eyes, regret, uncertainty, a flicker of guilt. But there was none. Just expectation. And so I nodded. Slowly, carefully, so he wouldn't see the tremble in my jaw. "All right," I said. "I'll make the arrangements." The words felt foreign coming out of my mouth, like I was speaking a language I'd never learned. Inside, I was crumbling, but I kept my face calm, still. Like I had for every bad harvest, every broken piece of machinery, every time I stood in the rain praying a flooded field wouldn't ruin the season. Because that's what years of labor teach you, to swallow the storm when it comes. Adam smiled then. Not a wide, happy smile, but the kind of smile people wear when they think they've won. He thanked me, hugged me with a quick pat on the back, and said he'd start looking at venues. As he turned to leave, he said something that clung to me like barbed wire. "You'll see, Dad. It'll be worth it. You'll be proud when you see how beautiful everything is." Proud. I watched him drive away in that shiny car, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. He really believed I'd feel proud watching him spend everything I'd built on a party. He truly thought I'd smile while watching our legacy poured into a champagne fountain and a choreographed dance floor. That I'd look at my wife's old garden, now bulldozed for parking, and feel joy. I went back inside, sat in the kitchen, and stared at the chipped teacup May always used. I held it like it was something fragile and sacred because it was. I could almost hear her voice in the walls. "Don't be too hard on him," she would have said. "He doesn't understand." Maybe she was right. But even if he didn't, understand the damage was done. Because for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Like the things I had treasured all these years no longer had value. Not to the world, not to my son. The land I loved had become a burden in his eyes. And I couldn't help but ask myself, where had I gone wrong? But behind my silence, something was building. Not anger. Not revenge. Just heartbreak. My own son. Willing to bury my legacy for a party he couldn't afford. Willing to throw away what his grandfather built, what I maintained through loss and hardship, all for a fleeting moment of applause and admiration. It wasn't even the money that hurt. It was the casual way he cast it all aside. Like none of it mattered. Like I didn't matter. But what Adam didn't know was that I never intended to let go of my land. Not truly. That night, after Adam left, the house felt heavier than usual. The quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, like something vital had been taken out of the air. I walked out onto the porch, sat in the same spot where I used to rock Rachel to sleep, and just stared out at the fields. The sun was setting, low behind the trees, casting long shadows over the land, and I felt every second of my 72 years. But more than the exhaustion, more than the ache in my back or the tightness in my chest, I felt something deeper. Grief. Not the kind you feel when someone dies, but the kind that settles in when you realize something sacred to you has become meaningless to someone you love. I thought about the years, decades, spent fighting to keep this farm alive. The times May and I skipped meals to pay for feed. The nights I sat at the kitchen table calculating whether we could afford to keep the tractor running another season. All of it, every sacrifice, every prayer, every calloused fingertip, dismissed as outdated. Forgotten, just like the land itself. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to hate Adam. I couldn't even fully blame him. He didn't grow up in the world I did. He didn't see the same things. Maybe I should have taught him better. Maybe I failed to pass on what this land really meant, but I also knew something else. I couldn't let him destroy it, not for the sake of his ego, not for a wedding, not for anything. So I picked up the phone and called Rachel. She answered quickly, her voice always warm, always grounded. I didn't have to say much before she understood. That's the thing about Rachel. She listens with more than just her ears. She knew something was wrong the moment she heard my voice. I told her what happened, told her what Adam had asked, and her silence spoke volumes. Not judgmental, not angry, just still. She let me finish. Then softly, she said, "You can't let him take it, Dad. Not like this. And I knew she was right. We talked for over an hour. By the end of the conversation, we had a plan, not out of revenge, but out of preservation, out of love. Quietly, discreetly, I began the process of transferring the land into her name. We contacted a lawyer, set up the paperwork, created a trust that ensured the land couldn't be sold without her consent. I didn't want her to feel burdened, but she didn't hesitate for a second. She knew what this place meant, not just to me, but to our family, our history. She'd always been the one who got it. As the legal work moved forward behind the scenes, I played the role Adam expected of me. I kept him updated, told him I was working on the sale, meeting with appraisers, getting quotes. He never once asked how I felt about it. Never once offered to compromise or consider another option. He'd send photos of venues, cake tastings, flower arrangements. I'd reply with polite comments, nodding, pretending to be on board. It was strange lying to my own son. But I wasn't doing it to hurt him. I was doing it to protect something he didn't understand. In the evenings, I'd walk the fields and talk to May like I used to. I'd tell her about our daughter, how strong she'd grown, how fiercely she loved this land. I imagined her smiling, nodding, proud that someone still carried our values. Some days I'd find myself standing by the old oak tree, just running my fingers across the bark, trying to remember all the times we'd gathered there as a family. Birthdays, Easters, lazy summer afternoons with lemonade and laughter. It was all still here, stitched into the soil, the air, the creak of the barn doors. And I wasn't going to let that disappear, not while I still had a breath left in me. As the weeks went on, Adam grew more impatient. "Did you talk to a realtor yet?" He'd text. "We're running out of time to book the venue." I'd respond with vague reassurances, and he'd reply with thumbs-up emojis and exclamation marks. It was surreal, watching him get so excited over something that was built on a lie. But even then, I didn't hate him. I pitied him. I pitied the version of him that thought wealth and status were the measure of success. That believed legacy could be traded for a dance floor and designer centerpieces. I prayed more than once that one day he'd understand, that he'd walk this land as a man and feel what I felt, that connection to something greater than yourself. That sense of being part of a story that started before you and will outlast you. I didn't know what would happen when the truth finally came out, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let my life's work be bulldozed under a wedding tent. I wasn't going to let the land that held my wife's laughter, my father's sweat, my children's first steps, become a parking lot for strangers in suits and rented smiles. No, the farm would stay in the family. And even if Adam couldn't see it now, I hoped someday he'd be grateful I protected it, even from him. That night after our talk, I sat in silence for a long while before picking up the phone to call Rachel again. She was always the one I could count on, the child who never needed to be told twice, who watched more than she spoke, who somehow knew when something was weighing on me before I ever said a word. Even as a girl, she had a kind of old soul about her, as if the wisdom of her mother and grandmother had passed straight into her blood. She didn't just see the farm as a place, she saw it as a living part of us. So when I called her and told her everything, Adam's request, the weight of it, the quiet way it had torn something open in my chest, she didn't ask why I hadn't said no. She didn't question my silence. She just listened. And when I finished, when I told her I couldn't let the farm go, she said with absolute certainty, "Then don't." That's when the plan took shape. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of a deep, protective love. I told her I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to shame her brother or cut him out of the family. I just wanted to protect what mattered. We agreed it had to be quiet, clean, and legal. No room for misunderstanding, no loose ends. We got in touch with a local attorney, an old friend of mine who'd helped me draw up our wills years ago. I trusted him. He understood the weight of land and legacy in a way city people never could. With his help, we transferred the deed into Rachel's name. Quietly. No public record searches that would raise Adam's eyebrows. We created a trust that locked everything down. From that point forward, the farm couldn't be sold, mortgaged, or claimed without Rachel's explicit consent. It was ironclad, bulletproof. Mine while I lived, hers once I was gone. And Adam? Well, he never even saw it coming. To complete the illusion, I liquidated a modest portion of my retirement savings, just enough to give him what he needed to book the venue, put down deposits, and feel like he'd accomplished something big. It wasn't a huge sum, but it was enough. When he came by a week later, I handed him the check with a smile and a nod. He took it like it was owed to him, like I was finally coming around to modern thinking. He grinned wide, gave me a side hug, and said, "See, I knew you'd come around, Dad. I knew you'd get it eventually." I said nothing, just let the silence stretch as he walked back to his car, already texting someone, probably his fiancée, probably telling her the money was in hand. I stood on the porch and watched him go, feeling a mix of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. He thought he had won. He truly believed he'd convinced the old man to cash in his roots for a slice of temporary glory. Over the next few weeks, I heard through the grapevine, mostly through Rachel and the occasional Facebook post I barely knew how to navigate, that Adam had been bragging, telling people he'd finally talked some sense into me, that I'd come to my senses and let go of the farm to help launch his next chapter. Apparently, it was a running joke among his friends. He was proud of it, proud of what he thought he'd accomplished. I heard him once on speakerphone while Rachel was visiting, telling someone that the old man finally saw the light. She looked at me, her expression tight, but I shook my head. Let him have it, I told her silently. Let him believe what he wants, for now. Because the truth was, the real lesson hadn't arrived yet. And when it did, it wouldn't come with shouting or confrontation. It would come with stillness, with undeniable reality. Because one day soon he'd come back. Maybe to build something, maybe to sell something, maybe just to stake a claim, and that's when the truth would rise from the soil like spring growth. That's when he'd find out he'd never owned a single inch of this land. Not anymore. He'd learned that while he was chasing sparkle and spectacle, the foundation had shifted beneath him. And that sometimes, the loudest message is delivered without a single raised voice. In the meantime, I let the days unfold quietly. I tended the garden, repaired the fence near the south field, shared slow cups of coffee with Rachel while the sun poured through the kitchen window. The paperwork was filed. The deed was safe. The farm was protected, and for the first time in weeks I slept through the night. There was no victory dance, no moment of triumph, just a quiet peace that settled over me, like the stillness of dusk after a long day's work. Adam had what he wanted, or thought he did. And I had what I needed, the knowledge that this land, this legacy would live on beyond me, untouched by greed, preserved by love. Sometimes people think protecting something means standing up and shouting. But I found that true strength is quiet. It's found in restraint and wisdom, in the ability to plan and wait. And now all I had to do was wait. 2 months passed. The wedding came and went in a whirlwind of photos, fireworks, and dollar signs. I didn't attend, not because I wasn't invited, but because I knew I wouldn't belong there. I sent a polite card, wished them well, and stayed home. Spent that day in the backfield, watching the sky stretch out overhead, listening to the land breathe beneath my boots. Rachel visited after the ceremony, told me everything went according to plan, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She said it felt hollow, like everything was performed for show rather than meaning. Still, I said nothing. My time to speak would come soon enough. And it did. It was a bright, unassuming morning when Adam returned. I heard the tires crunching on the gravel drive before I saw him. Same sleek black car, same sunglasses, same confident stride. But something about his energy was different, bigger, more determined. He walked right up to the porch where I was fixing the gate hinge, full of smiles and ideas, his phone in hand and that "I've got it all figured out" look in his eyes. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't comment on the new flower beds Rachel had planted or the clean paint on the barn door. Instead, he launched straight into it. like I'd been waiting around just to hear his next brilliant plan. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking. Now that the wedding's done and things have settled, it's time we start looking ahead." I looked at him, not speaking, just letting him run, and he did. "Me and Sarah talked about it, and we think there's real potential here. You've got good land, prime location. I mean, sure, it's old, but that just means opportunity. We could fix it up, sell it, maybe even build out part of it. Think eco-resort or rental cabins. People pay good money for rustic getaways these days." He said it all so casually, like he was reading off a proposal from a marketing firm. Like this place, my home, was just a stepping stone in his new investment portfolio. "We can finally make some real money off that place," he said, nodding like it was a done deal. That place. He didn't even call it home. Didn't say the farm or your land or even ours. Just that place, as if it were nothing but a patch of dirt waiting to be flipped for profit. My jaw tightened, but I didn't say anything yet. I let him keep talking. He showed me mock-ups on his phone, plans for a new gravel driveway, modern barn conversions, a pool overlooking the east field. He had it all figured out, down to the projected rental income. I waited until he was done, until the last spreadsheet was swiped, the final estimate proudly shown off, and then I stood up. I walked to the edge of the porch, stared out at the land, took a breath. Then I turned to him and said quietly, "You can't do that." His brow furrowed. "Can't do what?" "You can't sell the farm," I said, still calm, "because it isn't yours to sell." There was a pause. A blink of silence where the weight of my words hadn't yet landed, then his smile faded just a bit. "What do you mean? You sold it to get the money for the wedding, didn't you?" "I mean, that's where the money came from." I shook my head. "No, the money came from my retirement. I gave you what I could afford. The farm was never sold." His mouth opened slightly, confusion spreading across his face like a slow burn. "But you said—" "I never said anything," I corrected him gently. "You assumed." He took a step back, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "So you're telling me the farm is still in your name?" I looked him in the eye. "No. It's not in mine either. It's in Rachel's. Has been for weeks. And it's protected by a legal trust. You can't sell it. You can't touch it." There was a beat of stunned silence. His face shifted. Shock, first, then something colder. His voice dropped. "You tricked me," he said, his tone suddenly sharp. "You lied." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just stared right back and said, "No, son, I protected what you were too blind to see." Adam stood there, frozen, as the full weight of my words hit him. For a moment, he didn't speak. Just stared at me like he was looking at a stranger, like the man standing before him wasn't his father, but someone he'd underestimated entirely. Then slowly his face twisted. Not in sadness, not in understanding, but in anger. "You went behind my back," he snapped. "You made a deal with Rachel and didn't even tell me. You gave her everything. You cut me out." His voice was louder now, trembling not with fear but frustration, the kind that comes from someone who's used to getting their way and has suddenly hit a wall. I stayed calm, though every word cut deep. "You weren't cut out, Adam," I said quietly. "You walked out. Long ago. You left this place behind and never looked back. When you returned, it wasn't with love. It was with a price tag in your hand." He scoffed, running a hand through his hair like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You act like I betrayed you, but all I asked for was help. A wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, Dad. You gave me the money. Didn't you? So what's the problem now?" I looked him square in the eyes. "The problem isn't the money, it never was. The problem is what you were willing to give up to get it. You asked me to sell the soul of this family for a party. You didn't ask what it meant to me. You didn't ask if I was okay with it. You just assumed it was yours to take. That's not help, Adam, that's entitlement." He flinched just a little, and for a flicker of a second I saw something. Shame, maybe, or recognition. but it passed quickly. And Rachel, he snapped. Of course she's the golden child. She played the long game, didn't she? She swooped in and took everything when I wasn't looking. I shook my head. Rachel didn't take anything. She accepted responsibility. I asked her to carry the weight of this farm because she understands it, because she cares about it. She didn't ask for a single dime. She didn't come with conditions. She listened. She stood by me. She earned my trust. His voice cracked slightly. So what? I made a mistake and now I'm out of the family, is that it? I stepped off the porch closer to him and lowered my voice. You're not out of the family, Adam. You're my son. You always will be. But actions have consequences. I didn't do this to punish you. I did it to protect something that you didn't value. One day maybe you'll understand why. He looked away, jaw clenched, hands balled into fists. He was silent for a long time, just breathing heavy, as if trying to wrestle with something inside himself he didn't want to name. You know, he muttered, I thought you were stuck in the past. I thought you were too stubborn to see the future. I waited, let him finish. But maybe I was the one who was blind, he finally said, softer now. Maybe I didn't see what was in front of me until it was too late. I said nothing, not yet. I wanted him to sit with that thought, let it grow roots. After a long pause, he looked back up at me. The rage was gone, the ego was fractured. What now? He asked. Not demanding, not entitled, just tired. I took a slow breath. Now, I said, you figure out who you want to be. Not for me, not for Rachel, for yourself. And maybe, when you're ready, you come back, not to claim, but to contribute. You're welcome here, but only if you see it for what it truly is, not a business opportunity, a legacy. He didn't reply, just nodded ever so slightly and walked back to his car. He didn't slam the door, didn't rev the engine. Just drove off slowly with the kind of silence that leaves a man thinking. And as I stood there watching the dust settle on the road, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. What I felt was bittersweet. Because sometimes, teaching a lesson means letting someone fall. Sometimes love means standing still while someone walks away, hoping they find their way back, not for what they can take, but for what they're willing to give. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about saving the farm, it was about saving my son from himself. The fallout wasn't pretty. After that day on the porch, Adam disappeared from our lives for a while. No calls, no visits, not even a birthday message. Rachel tried to keep the peace. She always did. She sent him gentle texts, checked in on him from time to time, tried to invite him over for dinner or holidays. But every effort was met with silence or vague excuses. She asked me once if she should try harder, if maybe I should be the one to reach out, but I told her no. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I understood what he needed more than anyone else did. He needed time, not scolding, not lectures. Just time to feel the emptiness that comes when pride fades and clarity creeps in. Time to reflect. Time to realize that not everything in life comes with a reset button or a quick fix. That some bridges, once burned, don't rebuild overnight. And so we let him be. The seasons rolled on. Summer faded into autumn and the trees around the property turned gold and copper, shedding their leaves like memories. Rachel stepped in more and more to help with the farm. She handled the accounts, spoke to suppliers, repaired what needed fixing without ever needing to be asked. She didn't take over, she stepped alongside me, shoulder to shoulder, just like I had always hoped one of my children would do. She wasn't loud about it. She didn't announce her dedication on social media or parade her sacrifices around. She just showed up, quietly, steadily, day after day. There were moments I'd catch her standing in the same places I used to see her mother, by the garden gate under the willow tree, walking along the ridge at dusk, and I'd feel something deeper than pride. I'd feel peace, because I knew The legacy was safe in her hands. And then, months later, on a cold but bright afternoon in late January, Adam came back. No warning, no grand announcement. I was stacking wood by the shed when I saw a familiar car turning into the drive. But it wasn't the sleek black one he used to drive. It was a dusty, older model SUV, the kind with no shine and no statement. He stepped out slowly, shoulders hunched, wearing a plain coat and jeans with dirt on the cuffs. No sunglasses, no fake smile, just him. And tears, real ones. Not dramatic, not forced. Just a man standing in the place he was raised, blinking back everything he never said. I didn't say a word. I just waited. He walked up to me, stopped a few feet away, and looked down at the frozen ground, before lifting his eyes to meet mine. And then he said something I hadn't expected. Not so soon, not so clearly. He said, "I get it now, Dad. I really do." He looked around, his gaze lingering on the barn, the trees, the weathered posts, still standing from when I was his age. It's not just land, it's not just a place, it's a story. Yours, Mom's, ours. His voice cracked. I thought legacy was about inheritance, but it's about sacrifice, about love. I see that now. I didn't rush to hug him, didn't throw my arms around him or burst into tears. I just nodded, slowly, like I was closing a loop that had been left open for too long. Then I reached out, put my hand on his shoulder and said, "That's all I ever wanted you to understand." He apologized, not with excuses, but with truth. He told me he had taken a job helping with nonprofit development, working on community gardens in underserved neighborhoods, said he was learning what it meant to work with his hands again, said he was trying to rebuild, not just his understanding of where he came from, but himself. And I forgave him, not because he had earned it, not because everything he'd done had been wiped clean, but because holding on to bitterness doesn't plant anything worth harvesting. You can't grow good things from soil that's poisoned by resentment. Forgiveness wasn't a gift for him, it was a release for me. That day, he sat at the kitchen table again for the first time in years. Rachel made tea. We didn't talk about who was right or wrong, we just talked. About Mom, about childhood, about mistakes and the roads they lead us down. He didn't ask for the farm back, didn't challenge the trust or question Rachel's role. He just said he hoped there might be a place for him in it again, even if it was small. I told him there always had been, and in that moment I knew we were healing. Not instantly, not completely, but honestly. The farm still stands just as it always has, stubborn and weathered, proud and quiet. Rachel runs most of it now. She's smarter than I ever was with the business side of things, but she still honors the old ways. She fixes the gate the way I taught her. She walks the fields at dawn like her mother used to, and every now and then Adam comes by, helps with repairs, talks to local students about sustainability, plants things with his own hands. Maybe one day he'll teach his children to do the same. Maybe they'll run through these fields barefoot in the summer sun asking the same questions he once asked me. And maybe, when that time comes, they'll know the story. Not just because someone told it to them, but because they feel it in the air, in the soil, in the way their hands ache at the end of the day. Maybe they'll look out across this land and understand that what we saved wasn't just a farm, but the heart of a family. The day Adam asked me to sell it all, I nearly gave up hope. But in the end, we chose legacy over luxury, and now, the land still lives, and so does the love behind it. What would you do if your child asked you to give up everything you've spent your life building for a single day of celebration? Would you say yes, trusting that love means sacrifice, no matter the cost? Or would you draw the line, choosing to protect something sacred even if it meant risking your relationship? It's a question no parent wants to face, and yet, it's one that reveals so much about who we are, what we value, and how far we're willing to go for those we love. In a world that moves fast and celebrates the temporary, stories like these remind us that legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's painful, but it always matters. So now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment like this? When someone you cared about asked too much or didn't understand the weight of what they were asking, did you say yes? Did you say no? Did it change you? Share your story in the comments below. Read every single one, and your voice just might help someone else walking through something similar. And if this story moved you, if it stirred something in your heart or made you think about your own family, your own roots, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell so you never miss another story. We share true, emotional stories that dive deep into life's hardest choices, quiet victories, and unexpected lessons. Because sometimes, the smallest stories carry the biggest truths. Thank you for watching, and remember, your legacy matters. Protect it, share it, and never be ashamed of where you come from.